Yeah. So with regards to the gangs, there's two aspects. There's the perception that it causes amongst the local community. So that perception of this street is dangerous because of X gang may be down there, or I heard last week that so and so was robbed in that particular street. So an example, perfect example of the reason why Robert Paul and Charles Cross, Charles Lechmere, may have chosen the route they chose and why they've been so wary when they come from their home on their way to work in the morning, because they don't know who they're going to come across. There was a gang called the Whites Row Gang that that used or terrorised the Bucks Row, the end of Bucks Row, as it went into, I think, Baker's Row, Whites Row, and then merged into Hanbury Street. And we've got evidence of robberies there. The typical robbery in 1888 or in the 1880s. Today it's the mobile phone. Then it was the gold watch and chain. So that's your object that most people are after, a snatch and then a runaway. And if you get a beating for as well, that could happen. So you've got gangs like the Whites Road Gang. The Trippers Up is more of a loose term. The Trippers Up are women. These were women who operated in a certain way, along with men sometimes, or on their own, and they would entice. They would use, "Can you treat me to a drink?" Um, and they would get someone to a local pub, they would get them drunk, or they would drink with them, and then they would take them to a location, whether that was a brothel, a private house, or an alleyway, and then they would be robbed, or they would just be pickpocketed. So you had those individuals roaming around. I read of a case where a gang standing at the corner of Commercial Street, it was around six men, um, saw a gentleman with a watch and chain, relatively well dressed, walked towards them. They parted into two groups, and as he walked through them, he was then tripped, assaulted, and robbed. And what's interesting about that is that you have to think that if this was being observed in 1888 at the bottom of Commercial Street, it makes whoever George Hutchison allegedly seen, that man must have had some courage to stand there displaying, his Astrakhan coat and his gold watch and chain and his tie pin, because these people were very real and they were roaming around. It was it, it, the kind of the fodder for these gangs was anyone passing through, anyone unfamiliar with the area. We obviously have lots of the sailors coming from docking at St George in the east. They were all vulnerable to these sort of attacks. And again, the killer, if whoever that killer was, and I'm not one who believes that, I have to say it's 100% Edward Buckley. I believe it's a man like him, if not him, would have had to negotiate, as well as the volatility of the women he may have come across. Would have to negotiate some of these gangs and these groups. The Whitechapel, the hospital end of Whitechapel, opposite Bucks Row, was a well-known haunt of unfortunates, along with their bullies, their controllers and related gangs, and people coming back from the musical, or coming down Cambridge Heath Road and trying to get onto the Whitechapel Road would have had to negotiate going past these people, and that's where poor Polly Nichols was heading on the night of her death, up to these areas which were well known for being trouble spots. The corner of Sydney Street as well. With regard to Edward Buckley and his brothers, Thomas Buckley and John Buckley, we find arrests all along that main Broadway, whether it's the top of the Whitechapel Road, many of the pubs, the Angel, the White Hart, etc. I've got arrest incidents within those pubs, which are right on top of the murder sites, and that's for violence and robbery.
But that's the interesting thing, isn't it? You've got I mean, robbery is rife in the area, robbery of strangers. I've got so many newspaper reports of the common lodging houses in Flower and Dean Street, of people actually being taken back to the lodging houses by a woman, and then there's a gang waiting for them, and they often pounce on them, rob them, even steal their clothing and send them out naked into the street. And on top of that, you've also got the situation where pickpocketing, where a man will go back to a common lodging house with a woman, pay for a cubicle, put his clothes over the chair. He might fall asleep and then wake up in the morning to find the woman's gone and his clothing and pockets have been picked. So I mean, Obviously, it was dangerous for women, but it was also dangerous for a man to actually venture into that area.
Absolutely.
And of course, add inebriation or getting drunk into that situation, and you really have got that, which I think is a largely unreported aspect of the Whitechapel murders, the gang aspect of the case. So I think that's what's an interesting thing about your research into Edward Buckley. If nothing else, it's brought the gang aspect into the full view of people who are reading and studying Jack the Ripper.